completely defeating the forces of materialistic civilization. Therefore it is said that Vani, or the instructions of the spiritual master, are more important than Bhakti, his physical presence. And in this respect, we have to understand that Srila Prabhupada has not left us. He is present in his instructions, and those faithful, sincere disciples who are able to repeat his instructions perfectly without changing them can preserve and expand all the effects of Srila Prabhupada's accomplishments. Srila Prabhupada. Namaste, Namaste, Saraswate, Saraswate, Deve, Gauravani, Gauravani, Pracharine, Pracharine, Nirvisesha, Nirvisesha, Sunyavadi, Sunyavadi, Paschatya, Paschatya, Desatarine, Desatarine, Namah. Krishna Prestaya, Bhutale, Srimate, Bhakti Siddhanta, Sarasvati, Namine, Sri Vashabhanavi Devi, Dayatoya, Kripabdhaye, Krishna Sambandha, Vijnana, Dayine, Prabhave, Namaha, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Nama Om Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Prestaya Bhutale, Srimate Bhakti Vedanta, Swami Niti Namine, Namaste Saraswati Deve, Gauravani Pracharine, Nirvisesha Sunyavadi, Paschatya Desatarine, Saha Pushpanjali, Srila Prabhupada ki, Saha Pushpanjali, Srila Prabhupada ki.
Prabhupada many kadamba trees. Kadamba is a kind of flower that is specially grown in Vrindavan, very fragrant and beautiful. Ananda Vardhana Prema Niketana Pulasara Yujuga Kama. So it was exciting the lusty desires of the gopis and increasing their transcendental bliss. Ananda Vardhana Prema Niketana, because his desire were all place. The gopis go fetch water, the blissful life, then we shall draw it from the reservoir of all pleasure, Krishna. Ananda Vardhana, that pleasure will increase. You cannot enjoy for a long time. It will decrease. But in spiritual pleasure, if you want to draw it from the reservoir of all pleasure, Krishna, then it will increase. Your pleasure potency will increase and you will get more and more pleasure. As you increase your pleasure potency or desire, the supply is also incessant. There is no limit. He transcendental Cupid. Cupid, the supreme Cupid, he was not any material concept of life, but simply dancing. Which is specially attracted by the Gopangana. There is so much attracted. The glass of Krishna, they could not give up his existence of his form within the heart for a moment. Chitta Vinodana, they captured the heart of the gopi. Chitta Vinodana, Samasta Vinodana, Nam. They are all dancing in one. Jona Jivana, Vedi Parayana, Agora. He looks toward the one side. Similarly, he was the hope among the gopis, and they were simply looking after him. And Rama please keep my walk. Lord, use God chant of
Stapitang jinabhutale swayam upagadamayam dadati swapadantikam. Just in case I forget to mention it afterwards, we need Prabhupada's Adi Trayat before 7:30. Anniversary of Srila Prabhupada's disappearance day. Prabhupada passed away this day in 1977, 19 years ago, at 7:30 p.m. I thought it would be appropriate to read some pastimes of Srila Prabhupada in Australia and specifically in Melbourne. I think last year or the year before I was reading about Prabhupada's disappearance, but I just felt like it would be more appropriate to read some nectarine pastimes of Prabhupada. So I've picked out a few selections here which will take us up to 7:30. At that time we'll have Arati for Srila Prabhupada and Kirtan, and then we'll serve out prasadam. Great Transcendental Adventure Part 1. Wednesday, 5th of April, 1972. April 1972. After 5 busy days of preaching in Sydney, Srila Prabhupada flew on to Melbourne, the capital of the state of Victoria. As the Ansett Airlines flight landed at Melbourne's Tullamarine Airport, about 20 devotees chanted loudly near Arrival Bay 3, despite objections from airport officials. This was Prabhupada's first visit to Melbourne. For many of the devotees who lived in the fledgling temple, it was to be their premier chance for personal association with their spiritual master, about whom they had heard so much. The kirtan reached a climax, then abruptly ended. As Prabhupada emerged, devotees showered him with marigolds and purple dahlias, then prostrated themselves on the floor. Prabhupada walked briskly to the VIP lounge for a pre-arranged press conference as the kirtan started up again. While press and television news crews rushed to set up their lights and cameras, Prabhupada sat down cross-legged on a soft chair and accompanied the chanting with kartals. He sat gravely, covered in garlands, surveying the small band of devotees that sat before him. Behind him on the wall, the devotees had mounted a bright red poster advertising Prabhupada's speaking engagements over the next few days. The questions came quickly. "What is your purpose in coming to Australia?" asked one reporter. "My purpose in coming is to broadcast the message of love of God, achievable through the chanting of the holy names, Hare Krishna. By chanting the Maha Mantra, the heart becomes cleansed of all dirty things." "Aren't you withdrawing from life?" "No, we are also working, we are also eating, we are also sleeping. But while other people are concerned with the material necessities of life, we are concerned with the spiritual necessities." A reporter asked about Christianity. He answered frankly that Christianity was a failure. "Of course, you do not know exactly what is God. If I ask God, you cannot tell me." There was a need, he explained, for God consciousness everywhere. Therefore, he said, he travelled everywhere, just as a salesman travels everywhere. A salesman, he said, looks for customers wherever he can find them. Similarly, he was travelling, searching for anyone intelligent enough to accept his message. There is no difference in coming to Australia, he said. The governments have made a demarcation. This is Australia, but we see everywhere as the land of Krishna. The Melbourne Temple at 14 Burnett Street, St Kilda, was a neat white terrace house, nestling between a private hotel and a line of other standard late Victorian terrace houses, in the centre of the beachside suburb of St Kilda. Yes. Although St Kilda's name had now become synonymous with crime, drugs and prostitution, it had not always been so. There was a time in the 1860s when St Kilda was the best address in Melbourne. Those who ruled Victoria lived there on elegant estates. In the early part of the century, St Kilda became the entertainment centre of Victoria. Its Luna Park, fashioned after New York's Coney Island, was the newest, greatest and best amusement park in the world when it had opened in 1912. During the tumultuous Second World War years, St Kilda hosted American troops on rest and recreation, and in the post-war years, the city was the first home for many newly arrived refugees from Europe. Although not losing its cosmopolitan appeal, St Kilda was certainly no longer a fashionable address. But the area offered easy access to the city, a short tram or train ride, and most importantly for the devotees, the rent was cheap. Most devotees had gone to the airport to greet Srila Prabhupada. Some stayed back, frantically scraping off the last spots of paint from the freshly varnished temple room floor. As the last buckets of rose-scented water splashed across the front footpath, a dark red limousine pulled up at the curbside. Prabhupada stepped out of the car, entered the front gate and walked down the little path. Tins of paint were whisked away from beside still wet walls, and gangplanks were hastily removed from the shiny temple floor. Srila Prabhupada had beaten most of the devotees back to the temple, and only a handful, some still in their work clothes, were there to greet him. The narrow-fronted terrace was deceptively extensive inside, although none of the 10 rooms were particularly large. What had probably been once the lounge and dining room were now transformed into a temple room and a room for the altar. Srila Prabhupada walked in and sat down on the turquoise and pale yellow Vyasa. Since work was still going on in the deity room, the curtains were closed. Apart from the sunlight that streamed through the front windows, the temple was not illuminated. Devotees in overalls, who had been sticking the last bits of the new altar together, hastily emerged from behind the curtains their hands still covered in quick drying glue. Krishna Premi, checking back her tears, started leading a kirtan with a harmonium as devotees rushed in from the airport. The temple started to fill. Someone offered a plate of Simply Wonderfuls to Srila Prabhupada, who indicated that they be distributed to the assembled devotees. Prabhupada appeared pleased with the work that the devotees had done in readying the new temple. "What's the rent?" he asked Hanuman, who had just raced in from the airport. Hanuman spoke up loudly. $34 a week, Srila Prabhupada. Cheap rent. For a 10-room terrace house. Prabhupada nodded in approval, looking round the room at the eager young boys and girls, who as neophytes knew practically nothing of spiritual life, and in most cases, very little of material life. Prabhupada knew that many of them had already been significantly ruined by illicit sex and drugs. Some were, in Prabhupada's terms, rich men's sons, but they had become hippies wandering the streets. Prabhupada, however, was confident that because they were sincerely trying to practice Krishna consciousness, their shortcomings would not prevent their spiritual progress. Prabhupada had explained in his Krishna book that although naturally beautiful, the Western youths were now dirty and morose. Their beauty had become covered. But just as the peacocks in Vrindavan begin to dance jubilantly at the onset of the rainy season, as the monsoons revive the dry land, similarly those youths were being revived by their chanting of the holy names and were dancing ecstatically. Prabhupada had pointed out in a letter to a devotee in London only the day before, quote, "Practically I am observing here in Australia that you Western boys and girls are becoming angels by taking up this Krishna consciousness process." After speaking some encouraging words, Prabhupada then departed for his room upstairs, promising to speak again that night. So I'm just going to pick excerpts, snippets, nectarine parts here from the book. Has just been reading from the typeset copy of the book, which so the book is actually getting closer to publication. This is a couple of days later. In 72, I think that it's going to get crowded in here, so if it gets a little crowded, you're all welcome to squeeze in and sit around. This installation of Sri Sri Radha and Krishna, the initiation of a dozen or so devotees into the chanting of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, one marriage, and the sannyas initiation of Hanuman Das. Srila Prabhupada came down to the temple room mid-morning and sat down on a gold satin cushion on the floor before the newly completed altar, a very basic box-like wooden construction decorated with stenciled white swans atop 3 marble steps. Directly in front of Srila Prabhupada stood the beautiful 35-centimetre deities of Radha and Krishna. I guess everyone knows. 35 centimetres. I think I wrote 2 foot or something. But anyway, I guess the times move on. The American readers might be able to understand that, but Radha Krishna, that's small, that's 12 inches, right? 14 inches? Yeah. That's the small deities of Radha Krishna on the altar, the small Radha Krishna. I have a very beautiful picture of Prabhupada bathing the small deities of Radha and Krishna going in. Directly in front of Srila Prabhupada stood the beautiful 35-centimetre deities of Radha and Krishna. With great care and attention, Prabhupada lovingly bathed them in a mixture of milk, yogurt, ghee, honey and sugar syrup. The devotees who eagerly looked on noted how attractive Krishna was, with large hips, thin waist and an enchanting 3-fold bending form. After the bathing ceremony, Prabhupada spoke intently to the boys and girls seated before him. "So, you are getting initiation on this auspicious day when Lord Krishna and Radharani, his eternal consort, is now being established, installed on this auspicious moment, and you will be initiated to chant the Hare Krishna mantra in the beginning. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. As it is indicated in this verse, one who remembers the Supreme Personality of Godhead always, he remains always purified, Suchihi. Suchi means Brahmana, a purified man. A Brahmana means the intellectual class of man who knows hygienic rules, keeps himself always purified, and engages in studying Vedic literatures for understanding the world, God, himself, and their relation. In this initiation ceremony, there will be some persons who will be initiated for chanting the holy name, Some of them will be initiated for the second time. They were initiated before for chanting the holy name. Now they will be initiated with the sacred thread. The sacred thread means recognition of complete Brahminical culture. So the qualification of Brahmana is Satya Samadhamma Tatiksha Arjavam Jnanam Vijnanam Astikyam Brahma Karma Swabhavajam. Srila Prabhupada described these Brahminical symptoms and gave examples. Tatiksha means toleration. There may be so many tribulations, but a Brahmana is supposed to be very, very tolerant. The first-class example of toleration in the Western country is Lord Jesus Christ. He was crucified. Still, he did not take any steps. If he wanted, he could take steps, but he was tolerating. So this is a sign of Brahminical symptom. Prabhupada then called the devotees forward to receive their beads and spiritual names. Doug was a young, slightly built artist. Your name is Dormia Das, one of the commanders in the battlefield of Kurukshetra. John became Jaidama, named after one of the acharyas in the Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya. John's girlfriend Della became Devadarshan, one who can see all the demigods. Mignon became Mekhala, the belt of the universe. Sharon became Satyavati, and Steve, the young Greek boy, became Sanak. Srila Prabhupada asked each of these devotees to pledge that they would chant 16 rounds every day and would indulge in no meat eating, intoxication, gambling, or illicit sex life. Since his arrival in America in 1965, Prabhupada had noted how young Western boys and girls mixed unrestrictedly. Many of these boys and girls had joined the Krishna consciousness movement as boyfriend and girlfriend. There had been no question of his asking the newcomers to give up their partners, yet he uncompromisingly preached no illicit sex. The dilemma, however, had an obvious solution: marry the couples in Krishna consciousness. Traditionally, a sannyasi would never arrange or perform marriages, but Prabhupada gave priority to spreading Krishna consciousness. Jaidama and Devadarshan were full-time devotees who lived near the Melbourne temple as boyfriend and girlfriend. Now Prabhupada was getting them married. Krishna-conscious married life, the Grihastha ashram, would be the best arrangement for many of his new aspiring disciples. In Krishna consciousness, husband and wife should live together and help one another in spiritual progress. After the various ceremonies of exchanging garlands, placing vermilion in the part of the wife's hair, covering her head, and circumambulation of the groom by the bride, Prabhupada stressed to the young couple the seriousness of married life. So, you have agreed that there is no question of divorce in your life? In any circumstances, you cannot separate. Is that all right? You also agree? You cannot separate. There is no question of divorce. Even if you fight, you can remain in one temple, he can remain in another, but there is no question of divorce. So take in mind, that's all. Next, Shama Sundara assisted Srila Prabhupada in preparing the fire sacrifice. The fire blazed as it was fed with more and more fuel. As the flames leapt higher, the transcendental sound vibration of the chanting of the Vedic mantras sanctified the already auspicious day. Finally, Hanumandas, standing in the smoky temple before the sacrificial fire, was handed his sannyas staff by Shama Sundar and given his name by Srila Prabhupada, Hanuman Prasad Goswami. The conch shell blew and the white folding doors of the deity room drew back. Prabhupada and the devotees bowed down before the deities of Radha and Krishna, now dressed in their new white satin and lavender brocade outfit. Hanuman Prasad Goswami concluded the happy event with an exuberant kirtan. Bhakta Franco recalls, I was standing in the smoky temple room of at the doorway just before the arati was going to start. I was the photographer at the time and I was trying to get a good clear photograph of Srila Prabhupada. Many other photographers were there that day, and I found myself near the door of the temple room. As I was looking through the viewfinder, Srila Prabhupada suddenly turned and looked at me. I immediately took a photograph. I was also developing my own pictures, and a couple of days later I brought the photograph back and showed it to Upendra. Prabhupada's eyes were very moist, and he appeared somber, perhaps even a little sad. Upendra showed this photograph to Srila Prabhupada after it had been developed. Srila Prabhupada, you seem very sad in this picture, Upendra said. No, Prabhupada answered. I was feeling great ecstasy. We have that picture in the book. And this is very similar to another similar incident of a photograph of Prabhupada, I think way back in 66 or 67. But Upendra recalls this was a different incident, and Prabhupada said a similar thing. 500 years ago, each of the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan had had his own deity for whom he had built a beautiful temple. But Prabhupada was empowered to install and maintain many deities. Rukmini Dwarkadish in Los Angeles, Radha Govinda in New York, Radha Londonishwara in London, Radha Madhava in Mayapur, and in Sydney, Radha Gopinath. All were Prabhupada's worshipable deities, Archa Vigraha incarnations of Radha and Krishna, appearing at the request of their pure devotee for the benefit of neophyte devotees in various places around the world. Now, Radha and Krishna had come to Melbourne, and they were standing, giving eternal benediction to their worshippers. So I'll move on. 1 year. 6. Colonisation by Sankirtan. Saturday, 10th of February 1973. Srila Prabhupada took his morning walk in the King's Domain, the rolling green parklands on the southern outskirts of the city, bordering the famous Shrine of Remembrance. You take a tram along St Kilda Road and it's there on the left. Prabhupada, wrapped in a dark grey chadar and wearing saffron canvas slip-on shoes, spoke very little. He negotiated the winding gravel path that led from the car park and approached the forecourt of the shrine, flanked by cypress and elm trees, which stood like giant sentinels guarding the approach. The massive 17-metre granite cenotaph, resembling a huge Roman temple, was Victoria's memorial to its war dead. 12 hectares of surrounding grassy lawns made for an ideal, if not sombre, spot for a morning walk. Jason? Abel. Prabhupada noted the brass identification plaques at the base of each tree, the famous statue of Simpson and his donkey, and the eternal flame, all without comment. Walking briskly up the wide pathway, he paused momentarily as he passed an inscription set into the concrete in large brass lettering. "Let all men know this is holy ground." It is now. After Srila Prabhupada mounted the grey granite steps, he stopped briefly to read another plaque. "This monument is erected by a grateful people in the honoured memory of those who served the Empire in the Great War of 1914 to 1918. We have a picture, a photograph of this. Prabhupada and his party walked over a grassy hill and reached the outskirts of the Maya Music Bowl, a large music shell set in a natural grassy amphitheatre. Prabhupada stopped and asked, no one in particular, "What is that?" Franco, making the mistake of answering Prabhupada from behind, volunteered a frivolous reply. "That's where they come to enjoy Srila Prabhupada." Prabhupada turned and gave Franco a very stern look. Later, stopping under a large tree, Prabhupada asked, "Is that a eucalypt? Bring me a branch." A devotee took a small branch and gave it to Srila Prabhupada, who confirmed that it was. Prabhupada kept walking and entered the outskirts of Melbourne's famous Botanic Gardens, ablaze with crepe myrtle, brightly coloured dahlias and yellow golden chalice vines. After a brief circuit in the gardens, Prabhupada returned to the temple for Guru Puja in class. While preparations were underway for the grand installation ceremony and initiations, this is the installation of Radha Vallabha, Prabhupada took the opportunity, this is the Melbourne Temple still in St Kilda at this time, Prabhupada took the opportunity to attend to the many letters that were waiting for him. To Tamal Krishna, Jayapataka, Bhavananda and Gargamuni he wrote, "While travelling here to Melbourne, I was thinking how wonderful our Mayapur project is and how it can be developed in the future. I want that Mayapur be self-sufficient by having its own production of grains, vegetables and fruits and milk products, to the extent that you will be able to feed at least 500 men daily. This will be better than trying to arrange for maintenance funds to come from outside, so we should make some scheme for purchasing sufficient quantity of land. The land there is very fertile, and if our men can manage the program, then we can go ahead. So now you all make inquiries for purchasing as much land as we shall require, and immediately inform me how much money shall be required." He concluded by clarifying his travel plans. "I shall be in Sydney until the 18th, then going to New Zealand and Indonesia. I shall return to India during the first week of March. Lately, Srila Prabhupada had been corresponding with his senior disciples on a controversial topic, polygamy. Karanda had broached the subject with Prabhupada 1 month previously. Prabhupada had answered Karanda's inquiry by first describing its historical roots. According to our Vedic process, he said, polygamy is allowed. For example, Krishna married 16,000 wives. Arjuna married 3 or 4 wives. Krishna's father, Vasudeva, married 16 or 18 wives, like that. So according to the Vedic system, polygamy is not prohibited, but it is not a farce also. Every wife must be provided for sufficiently. Krishna married 16,000 wives, but each wife was provided a palace, and he was personally present at each palace. It does not mean to marry many wives and maintain none of them. If anyone is able to keep more than one wife and give them all comforts of life, there is no objection for having more than one wife. But if he creates trouble by marrying, he should not marry even one wife. This is my judgment. Prabhupada cautioned Karanda that before even considering it as a modern option, he should take into consideration the circumstances of the law of the country, the customs of the people, and especially both the reputation of the Krishna consciousness movement and the example that it would set for the future. The Vedic system of marriage, Prabhupada explained, was given by Krishna so that non-devotees could be eventually elevated to devotees. But as far as those who were already devotees were concerned, he said, minimization of sex to the point of nil was the primary concern. Prabhupada did concede, though, that as well as maintaining a class of men who do not marry, an ideal society also required a class of men to protect the excessive population of unmarried women. Under those circumstances, it was advisable that men who were able to maintain more than one wife should do so, to free other men to remain celibate. Prabhupada added a warning, however. You must consider very carefully the possibility of becoming scandalized in the public for breaking their laws in this way. In the future also, the devotees who are neophyte may not understand our policy, and we could gradually wind up attracting only a class of men who are very eager for unlimited sex life only. These things must be avoided at all costs. The letter to Karanda had been widely circulated and discussed in various forums and had led to some confusion amongst devotees. Now Prabhupada again wrote to Karanda with his final decisions on the subject. Quote, I have received your letter of 1/24/73 concerning polygamy and feel that this policy must be strictly prohibited within our society. If it is not, it shall only cause chaos, as what was possible under the system of pure Vedic culture is impossible at the present time. To Satsvarup Das Goswami he also wrote, regarding your various questions, first let us understand that polygamy cannot be permitted in our society. Legally it is impossible, and neither are there many of our devotees who are prepared to assume the responsibility for many wives. Therefore, as I have suggested previously, as they do in the Christian religion, they have so many convents where the women stay and they receive protection. The point is that the women must be protected, and it is the duty of the leaders of our society to see that this is carried out. Mid-morning, Saturday, 10th of February, Srila Prabhupada descended to a packed temple room for the installation ceremony of Radha and Krishna, Radha Vallabha. He took his seat adjoining the small brick fire pit. Then Madhavisa carried the marble deities. Who were still covered in pink satin cloth, and placed them one by one into small bathing receptacles in front of Srila Prabhupada. While Shrutikiti decorated the sacrificial arena with coloured rice flour, Madhavisa lifted the cloth covering Srimati Radharani. The assembled devotees cried, Jai, Haribo, seeing Radharani for the first time. We have a picture of this moment just after Madhavisa is taken off, when Prabhupada's looking directly at Radharani from his close. Prabhupada gazed lovingly at Radharani, noticing her pure white complexion and fresh, youthful beauty. Then the bathing ceremony began. The devotees loudly sang the Hare Krishna mantra as Prabhupada poured a small brass pot of scented water over Srimati Radharani's head. Next, the cloth covering was removed from Krishna. Glossy and black in complexion, Krishna also accepted the loving service of his great devotee, Srila Prabhupada, by way of the inaugural bath. To Prabhupada's right sat the three devotees taking initiation, a young boy, a girl who would become pujaris, a young boy and girl who would become pujaris, priests, and a slightly built elderly lady seated on a chair. Prabhupada gave a short talk on the significance of initiation, then, exacting a promise from the young boy and girl that they would not leave, but would rather always remain in the service of the deity, handed them their sanctified strands of chanting beads. The boy and girl became Ganesh Das and Sukla Dasi. The elderly lady received the name Aruni Dasi. Prabhupada lit the sacrificial fire. The customary mantras were intoned to the accompaniment of kirtan and readings from sacred texts. Devotees chanted Swaha and threw ghee-soaked grains into the flames. Prabhupada poured ghee that sent the blazing fire higher and higher. When finally bananas were placed into the fire, thick smoke quickly filled the room. Srila Prabhupada reminded the devotees that the smoke was very nice and told them not to open the windows. Srila Prabhupada rose from his seat. He planned to personally offer the first arti ceremony to the newly installed deities. While the kirtan was roaring, Srila Prabhupada left the deity room and, accompanied by Deepak, approached the deity room door as the pujaris were completing their altar decoration. Prabhupada slipped off his brown canvas shoes and entered. Deepak picked up Prabhupada's shoes and placed them to the side of the door. Suddenly Prabhupada turned. Setting the proper standard of cleanliness, he said, "You should wash your hands. You have just touched my shoes. You are unclean. Please go wash." The conch shell blew. Open doors revealed the beautiful deities situated on their new altar, surrounded by billowing plumes of frankincense smoke. To the accompaniment of melodic chanting, Prabhupada gracefully offered the auspicious articles, one by one. First the incense, then the blazing camphor lamp, ghee lamp, and scented water. Prabhupada gracefully offered each article in large, elegant, circular movements of his hand. The silk cloth, the scented white carnations, and the peacock fan were offered with similar deep devotion. Srila Prabhupada gazed at the beautiful forms of Radha and Krishna with a fixed intensity of concentration that inspired the assembled devotees. It appeared that Srila Prabhupada was directly seeing Radha and Krishna face to face. While kirtan continued, Prabhupada returned to his room and gave his two young disciples the mantras required for second initiation. He reiterated the importance of the sacred connection to the spiritual master, Diksha, and again stressed that the deity should now be served with great care and attention. "Look after Krishna very nicely," he said. Later, Prabhupada expressed his pleasure that the devotees had made nice arrangements to receive Radha and Krishna in Melbourne. He particularly commented on the beauty of Srimati Radharani and named the deities Sri Sri Radha Vallabha. Many devotees had made or purchased gifts for Srila Prabhupada. Vyasa announced at the feast after the ceremony that devotees could go up to Prabhupada's room to present their offerings. Chitralekha presented a special gift to Srila Prabhupada, a golden locket. Prabhupada opened it and looked inside. "Oh, what is this?" "That's a picture of your spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, on one side, and on the other is some cotton from Srila Rupa Goswami's quilt in Vrindavan." Prabhupada expressed his appreciation. "Oh, thank you very much. Very nice," he said. One by one the devotees entered the room, offered their obeisances and gifts, stayed a short while, and then filed out. That afternoon the double-decker bus, packed full with devotees, left for Sydney. Since it was Saturday and Prabhupada was due to fly to Sydney on Monday, it was necessary for them to leave immediately. The few devotees that had remained in Sydney needed help to prepare for Prabhupada's visit. The bus, with a top speed of 60 kilometres an hour on the flat and 30 kilometres an hour on hills, would take almost 24 hours to reach its destination. When the bus used to go up the hills, the devotees had to get out sometimes. You remember that, Renuka? Harry Sawyer. Huh? Steep hills. Harry Sawyer remembers. When the bus didn't sound like it was going to make it, a few devotees had to walk. They probably walked faster than the bus. But we've got a picture of Prabhupada on the bus, standing on the bus, holding the metal railing on those Sydney double-decker buses. Sunday, 11th of February 1973, with most of the devotees on the way to Sydney. Wow, a lot of tiny mistakes. The Melbourne temple was now quiet. In the morning after his walk, Srila Prabhupada gave Srimad Bhagavatam class. After breakfast, he attended to some more letters. Since Bali Madan had returned to New York on urgent business, Madhavisa was Prabhupada's new secretary. Guru Gauranga Das from Switzerland had written to Srila Prabhupada reporting an increase in the preaching work in Switzerland. Prabhupada replied, "I am very much encouraged to hear of your increased Sankirtan movement and your return to Geneva to open up still another chapter in Lord Chaitanya's conquest of the world. You may consult closely with Bhagavan Das on all matters, and he will give you good advice in this regards." Guru Gauranga had also mentioned that proportionate to their increase in Sankirtan, they were being increasingly harassed by the police. Prabhupada referred to the current problem in Australia. As far as police problems are concerned, this is going on all over the world, especially here in Melbourne. They are being persecuted by the police. Even they are going to jail daily, still they will not stop their chanting and distribution. When they go to jail, they refuse to eat the food, and in this way so much public sympathy is there. So eventually the police will accept us and our Sankirtan activities will go unchecked. Simply we must have the determination to continue our preaching work under all circumstances. Srila Prabhupada relaxed in his room as the afternoon Sunday feast program commenced downstairs. A sample plate of the feast had been offered to Prabhupada, who tasted morsels of each preparation, talking lightly between bites. The Ramakrishna mission, he said, is popular in Bengal because it does not restrict. Whatever you like you can eat, they say, but our mission does not say that. Formerly, Allen Ginsberg, Prabhupada pronounced it as Ginsberg, was very frequently coming to me, and he could understand, intelligent man, that we are not giving up these four principles. So he does not come anymore. He thinks, I cannot give up these, and Swami does not like me. Therefore, as an intelligent man, he does not come anymore. I'm thinking, his influence with the young men is not so strong anymore. Jason, can you make sure you're here for 7:30? Jason, to play the drum. Please. 7:30. I'm thinking, his influence with the young men is not so strong anymore. Madhavisa. Ginsberg? No. He's simply a remnant of a past age. Prabhupada. Old fossil. Madhavisa. Yes. Prabhupada. And Timothy Leary? Madhavisa. Jail. Prabhupada. He's in jail. Madhavisa. Yes, he's been arrested in Afghanistan and brought back to America. Madhavisa explained to Prabhupada that Leary, an ex-Harvard psychology instructor and once popular advocate of LSD, had been arrested previously and convicted for drug smuggling, then put into jail for 20 years, but he'd escaped from prison, flown to Algiers, and had been at large for 3 years. 1 month ago he had been handed over to the US officials and was now in jail again. Prabhupada shook his head. Yes, he said, he has killed your country by introducing this LSD. This is a great disservice. He and Ginsberg, not only drugs, but sex indulgence, homosexual sex also. It was not uncommon in his worldwide travels for Srila Prabhupada to meet up with parents of his disciples. Always, as in the case of the parents of Jagatarini and Shyamananda, they would leave with a favourable impression of Srila Prabhupada and his Krishna consciousness movement. In the afternoon, the parents of Satyavati came for a brief visit. Their daughter was presently attending to the service of the deities in Auckland. Her mother came with a humble request. When you go to Auckland, would you tell her that we miss her? Would you tell her that we are very well and we miss her? Prabhupada was respectful and charming. Yes, he said, that is my duty, to take care of all my disciples. I'm trying to reform all the boys and girls of the world. Madhavisa introduced the girl's father. Satyavati's father, Srila Prabhupada, he's a priest. The other night at our meeting at the Palais Theatre, he was preaching Krishna consciousness to all the people after the lecture. Prabhupada opened his eyes wide and nodded in appreciation. Because the father is good, therefore the daughter is good. That is nature. The daughter acquires the qualities of the father, and the son acquires the quality of the mother. Satyavati's mother told Srila Prabhupada that she also had a son, so he must acquire your qualities. After a while, the couple were ready to leave. The mother expressed her pleasure. "We are honoured that you let us speak to you." Prabhupada was encouraging. "Because your daughter has become Krishna conscious, you can also become. Please come to this temple and take advantage of it." Mother: "Oh, I love it, yes." Prabhupada: "He's already preaching, your husband. That's very nice." Mother: "Thank you very much." Prabhupada: "Give them prasadam." Mother: "God bless you." Prabhupada: "Hare Krishna." Mother: "Hare Krishna." It seemed that a number of other guests wanted to see Srila Prabhupada before his departure for Sydney the following day. 2 Indian gentlemen, regular donors to the Melbourne Temple, had asked to have Prabhupada's audience and were waiting outside his room. Madhavisa invited them in. "Srila Prabhupada, this is Mr. Thakuraj. He's a very good friend of ours, a loyal supporter, and he's very much attracted to your books. And the other gentleman, Srila Prabhupada, this is Dr. Sudhakaran. He came to the temple to deliver Chaitana's baby, the president's wife. The baby was born at Mangal Arati time. They called her Bhakti Moti." Dr. Sudhakaran spoke a little about his profession as a doctor and then ventured into philosophical areas, admitting that he was a devotee of Mother Durga. "I consider Krishna and Mother the same. I'm a devotee of Mother. I may be wrong, but this is the training I got." Prabhupada's reply was to the point. "You are devotee of Mother, we are devotee of Father. That is the difference. The Father is predominator, the Mother is predominated." Mr. Thakuraj changed the subject. "Your Divine Grace, what do you think is wrong with Gandhiism? Where do you think our Gandhi went wrong?" "We don't say Gandhiism," said Prabhupada. "Any ism without Krishna is wrong." Mr. Thakuraj was submissive. "I see. When I say Gandhiism, not the political side, but as far as his spiritual and religious approach," Prabhupada was frank. He had no knowledge about spiritual life. He was a politician. If he had any knowledge of spiritual life, he would have commented on Bhagavad Gita in a different way. How did he comment? "He has commented," Srila Prabhupada said, "on Bhagavad Gita. Kurukshetra is this body, Pandavas are the 5 senses. In his own way, he has no knowledge of spiritual life." Prabhupada turned to Dr. Sudhakaran. "You are a medical man. If I take a medical book and comment in my own way, is that authorized?" The doctor agreed that this was not a very good proposal. Prabhupada continued to expound more timeless and practical philosophy. Later the men excused themselves and Prabhupada's room was again quiet. Monday, 12th of February 1973. Dr. Sudhakaran is still regularly coming. He's our first donor. Still donating regularly for 25 years. Very, very regulated. 23 years. No, 72 he started coming. Monday, 12th of February 1973. Srila Prabhupada was due to depart mid-morning. As Prabhupada relaxed and softly chanted japa in the airport departure lounge, his 2 young, newly initiated disciples, Sukla and Ganesh, applied sandalwood paste to his feet and forehead. Bhakta John's 2-year-old son, Yanaka, bare-chested, shaven-headed and wearing a little dhoti, approached Prabhupada with a flower. We have a photograph of this. Prabhupada accepted the offering and smiled affectionately at the boy. A few minutes later, Janaka returned, gesturing that he wanted the flower back, and Prabhupada graciously assented. The boy repeated the procedure a few more times, offering a flower and then asking for it back. As he came up to take back a flower for yet another time, Prabhupada held onto the flower, refusing to return it. The boy grabbed for the flower, but Prabhupada would not let it go. Janaka decided to change tactics. Stopping the tug-of-war, he picked up a flower and threw it at Prabhupada. Prabhupada reciprocated by throwing it back. Janaka threw another, and so did Prabhupada. Finally, out of ammunition, Janaka tried to grab a flower directly from Prabhupada's garland. Prabhupada grabbed the boy's hand in mid-air and held it tightly, not letting it go. With a mock grave expression, Prabhupada took a flower from his garland with his other hand and threw it at Janaka at point-blank range. Much to the delight of the devotees, the exchange now escalated into a fully fledged flower fight. The boy sometimes crept up behind Prabhupada, collecting more ammunition from Madhavisa and throwing them with unabashed glee. Prabhupada reciprocated, all the while laughing and enjoying the fun. It had been arranged that Srila Prabhupada would take his lunch at Melbourne Airport before flying to Sydney, but the prasadam was late coming from the temple and arrived just before departure time. So the whole prasadam, including Prabhupada's silver tray, bowls and cups, were taken aboard the aircraft. Prabhupada's party were flying first class, and Srila Prabhupada, Shrudikirti and Madhavisa were soon seated. Prabhupada, as regulated as ever, decided to take lunch immediately. Shrudikirti set up the silverware on the in-flight tray table. Prabhupada, unself-consciously and with great respect and concentration, commenced to eat. The flight attendants were making final announcements for departure. All passengers should fasten their seatbelts and see that the tray tables in front of them were fully secured. Prabhupada continued to take prasadam as the other passengers buckled their seatbelts and put their trays in the upright position. A female attendant suggested to Prabhupada that his table would have to be secured and the plates moved, but she didn't insist on Prabhupada's conforming. Prabhupada continued to calmly eat as the jet sped down the runway. Shrudikirti anxiously held onto the cups and bowls as the plane turned its nose upward, while Prabhupada, still absorbed in prasadam savour, appeared not to notice or care for his surroundings. Only when the plane was high in the air and Prabhupada had finished his prasadam did he turn to Shrudikirti. "All right," he said, "you can take these away now," and he rose to wash his hands. Two long rows of devotees, 70 in all, chanted ecstatically at Sydney Airport as Prabhupada walked across the tarmac. They didn't have those boarding tunnels in those days. We went right from the plane to the terminus. You always walked across the tarmac. We have a very nice picture of Prabhupada crossing the tarmac. Only when Prabhupada finally sat down to speak with the press in the lounge did the roaring kirtan come to an end. Prabhupada appeared as majestic as a king of old. From his body emanated a golden effulgence, and he seemed powerful yet humble. The Sydney devotees had certainly done better this year in arranging for an airport reception, befitting Prabhupada's exalted spiritual position. This was the way to receive Krishna's representative, with all the grandeur and magnificence due to God himself. The old blue Volkswagen, filled with spiritual sky incense smoke, had seen better days and seemed to the devotees inappropriate transport for their divine master, especially after the tumultuous airport reception. But this was all they could afford, and Prabhupada made no complaint as they whisked him back to the temple in Glebe, a suburb lying a few kilometres southwest of central downtown Sydney. In its earlier years, Glebe had been a fashionable area, but it was now a working class area. A growing interest in restored old buildings was again making it popular. Prabhupada had disembarked and left the airport so quickly that the devotees staying back to finish this year's refurbishments on the temple were not quite ready. Harisori couldn't believe it when he heard the kirtan start up outside the front of the temple. He had just glued a marble slab on front of Prabhupada's new Vyasa and was halfway through sticking on the wooden liners, still wet with gold spray paint. Prabhupada suddenly entered the temple room. Prabhupada paused when he noticed the saw, hammer, nails and other bits and pieces on the sawdust-strewn floor. "Clean it," he said mildly, and he sat down on the Vyasa. Harisori nervously asked the devotees to wait outside. He wasn't sure if Prabhupada was disturbed or not. Removing all the tools, he quickly swept the entire temple as Prabhupada watched patiently. Then, as the devotees filed into the temple, Prabhupada, to Harisori's relief, smiled broadly and began to speak with great pleasure and satisfaction. Prabhupada spoke at length, explaining how cleaning the temple, Mandira Marjana, was such a potent spiritual act that by doing so one could cleanse one's heart and make rapid spiritual progress. The devotees had moved Srila Prabhupada's Vyasa to the far end of the temple. He seemed pleased. He also noticed other changes, including a new, better altar. "So, it is very good that things have improved since last year," he said. "In this way, every year, there should be some improvement." The house next door to the temple had been suitably furnished for Prabhupada's week-long stay. When Prabhupada entered his room, he asked why there was neither a bookcase nor books. Madhavisa sent Bhakta Bob, who had dealt in antiques, to purchase one, and within a short time, the peach-coloured quarters were decorated with a bookcase and a full collection of His Divine Grace's transcendental books. Tuesday, 13th of February 1973. Sydney's picturesque botanic gardens, ranked amongst the world's oldest, and encompassed an area of over 30 hectares. The lower gardens adjoined the Sydney harbour, their ponds, shaded groves, flower beds and extensive lawns dotted with exotic palms seemed an ideal venue for Prabhupada's morning walk. Prabhupada, cane in hand, entered the gardens near the Conservatorium of Music, walking briskly through the central walkways. The party passed several large, sprawling Moreton Bay fig trees, Ficus macro, relatives of the famous banyan tree, Ficus bengalensis. Prabhupada noticed their similarity and briefly quoted the verse from Bhagavad Gita, Urvamulamadaashakam, comparing the material world to a giant inverted banyan tree. Prabhupada walked on, past large pepper trees. As the sky reddened with approaching sunrise, they caught glimpses of the harbour through the tree line. A large cabbage tree palm marked a dividing pathway. Prabhupada turned right and followed a path sloping downwards past an old gazebo to a decorative lake inhabited by splashing black ducks. Crossing a little wooden bridge over a man-made pond, the party reached Farm Cove, bordered by a walkway directly adjoining the water's edge. The lights of the North Shore twinkled in the distance. A slight chill breeze blew and the occasional light of a silent ferry could be seen gliding across the bay. Magpies warbled their morning melody, a discordant panpipe tune. Kookaburras laughed on a distant tree as the early morning commuter traffic rumbled in the distance. A white ibis stood silhouetted against the water as the tangerine-coloured sky reflected on the smooth dark gloss of Sydney Harbour. Prabhupada reached the Sydney Opera House, nearing completion for its gala opening. The buildings, with their striking design, resembled the white sails of a ship or the shell of an exotic marine creature perched by the harbour, reflected the morning light. Prabhupada and the devotees followed the path as it turned back on itself past Government House and the towering Sydney Harbour Bridge. Prabhupada stopped, pointing at the bridge with his cane. "This is a famous bridge." "Yes, Srila Prabhupada," a devotee answered. "When it was built, it was famous for being the world's largest steel arch." Prabhupada appeared not so impressed. "I've seen bigger," he said, and resumed walking. On the final leg, the party passed tall acacias and eucalypts, returning to the van and headed back to the temple for the morning program and a light Ekadasi breakfast. We have a nice picture of Prabhupada with the Sydney Harbour Bridge behind him. Good one. Okay, we're not going to read even a quarter of what I just put aside here, so I'll read a few particularly appropriate sections. Prabhupada, some of the instructions that Prabhupada gave right here in this room. So we've moved on to chapter 10 or 11. This chapter is called Such a Nice Temple. Prabhupada's here in Melbourne and he's staying here in this room. And this is towards the end of Prabhupada's visit, the 22nd of May, 1975. Srila Prabhupada had been booked on a flight to Honolulu via Fiji that was scheduled to leave that afternoon. After deliberation, however, considering travel on a Thursday afternoon to be inauspicious, Prabhupada decided to extend his stay in Melbourne for an extra day. Madhavisa Swami requested Srila Prabhupada that since the devotees and congregation were so eager to be with him that he allow them a special darshan before he left for overseas. Prabhupada agreed on an afternoon meeting in his room. Such an open darshan would be the first of its kind in Australia, and the devotees eagerly looked forward to this special event. Towards the latter half of 1974, a large Melbourne advertising agency had approached the devotees. the company had asked them if they would like to feature in a massive advertising campaign for the Wrangler clothing company. Some devotees feared that the offer was Maya. Others, considering that devotees would be well paid for their participation, thought that it sounded like a good idea. Vyasa Swami and Ugrasrava especially thought it an excellent proposal. So on 2 successive early mornings in October, the Melbourne brahmacharis were photographed performing their Sankirtan, with a difference. By the time Prabhupada had arrived in Melbourne to inaugurate the new temple, the campaign had reached its peak. The photographs, now superimposed with the caption, "If I can't wear my old Wrangler shirt, I'm not going," had appeared throughout Australia as full-page newspaper advertisements in magazines, cinema houses and on billboards. Before Prabhupada's massage, Ugrasrava took Prabhupada on a short drive. As Prabhupada sat in the passenger seat, Ugrasrava related the story of the Wrangler campaign. It had become so popular all around Australia, Ugrasrava explained, that the agency had even recorded similar ads for radio and television and had paid the devotees several $1,000s for their work. On the return drive to the temple via the city centre, Ugrasrava decided to show Prabhupada one of the massive billboards featuring the famous poster. Ugrasrava recalls, "I pulled up next to a vacant lot on the corner of Latrobe Street and Elizabeth Streets. There, on an exposed wall, was one of the massive posters. It must have been at least 40 feet wide. I pointed it out to Srila Prabhupada. It was an amazing sight, and I explained that it would certainly capture the attention of thousands of city commuters every day. While we were parking there, I told Prabhupada that some devotees had thought the whole campaign had been Maya. Prabhupada was looking at the poster with a big smile. It was obvious that he liked it. He turned to me and shook his head. No, the boy who did this," he said, smiling so much that his teeth showed, "is very intelligent." We've got the picture in the book. You've seen it, most of you have seen it. Devotees in Kirtan. One devotee with a Wrangler shirt. That afternoon, devotees arrived for their special darshan with Prabhupada with garlands, fragrant bouquets and other gifts. Soon the shiny parquet floor of Prabhupada's room was covered with devotees. Srila Prabhupada sat in their midst, appearing relaxed as he sat on his chaise longue, his left leg folded over his right knee, his right leg hanging down in front of him. One by one, devotees came forward and offered their garlands, flowers and various gift-wrapped parcels. A young New Zealand girl of hippie appearance stood and presented her rather unkempt daughter in front of Prabhupada. She asked Prabhupada if he could give her daughter a name. Prabhupada thought for a moment and smiled graciously. "Mrinalini," he said. Another girl came up with her young son and proceeded to show Prabhupada all his drawings one by one. "This is a Timingila fish. This is a Surabi cow. This is Krishna." Prabhupada patiently sat as the girl slowly went through a large stack of drawings one by one. The devotees fidgeted nervously at the disproportionate amount of time that the girl was taking up. Prabhupada patiently received all the gifts and then sat silently, slowly looking around the room. Vyasa Swami spoke up. "Srila Prabhupada, these devotees had come here because they would like to have more personal association with you. Just like you're sitting here." Prabhupada was sitting here facing him. Srila Prabhupada laughed. "Yes, I also like. Yasya prasadat bhagavat prasado yasya prasadan nagati kutopi. This is essential, to be anxious to be associated with the spiritual master. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has stated that by the mercy of Krishna one comes in contact with the bona fide spiritual master. By the mercy of the spiritual master one gets Krishna. Krishna is in everyone's heart. He knows what we want." Prabhupada gazed around the room at the mixed group. There had been a rumour that at this meeting Prabhupada would diffuse the tense standoff situation between the inside and outside groups. Prabhupada continued, "So, when we sincerely want Krishna, then Krishna sends his representative Guru. Guru is the external representative of Krishna. So, to the sincere student, Krishna teaches from inside and outside. That is the way, so that he quickly becomes fit for going back to home, back to Godhead. Your behaviour to be attached to the spiritual master is a good qualification, and it is very much appreciated both by Krishna and his devotees. So please continue this attitude and follow the instructions. Then you will go back to home, back to Godhead. It is guaranteed." It is not difficult to go back to Godhead, especially since in this age Krishna has personally appeared as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he is very, very kind to the fallen souls. Srila Prabhupada quoted from his favourite bhajan, Narottam Das Thakur's Ishta Deva Vigyapti. In this age, he said, everyone is papi, most sinful, and tapi, always suffering. Lord Chaitanya, along with his associates, have come to deliver all their papi tapis. If we take shelter of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu by his mercy, we get everything. So now, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Prabhu have come to Melbourne, looking very nice. So, please keep yourself engaged always in their service. How? Sri Vigraharadhana Nityanana Sringara Tanman Dhiramajanado. Sri Vigraharadhana, by the process of deity worship, Archana, beginning from Mangal Arati up to the Sayana Arati, everything should be done very nicely. And the temple should be made very clean. Tan Mandira Marjana. To dress the deity is as important as cleansing the temple also. Not that the temple will remain dirty, simply you are dressing the deity. No. Keep everything within the temple very neat and clean. And the more you keep the temple neat and clean, the more you will be neat and clean within your heart. Then you will understand Krishna very easily. Presently we cannot understand Krishna because our heart is piled up with so much garbage. So we have to cleanse the heart, then Krishna understanding will come. The room was very still. Srila Prabhupada concluded, so I am very much pleased that we have secured this nice building. Keep it very neat and clean and go on chanting and dancing. Utilize the open land to grow flowers. In this way, make the center unique. And it is a recognized building. If people understand that this building is now a temple and very nicely kept, people will come and see. So keep yourself always in touch with the principles and chant Hare Krishna. You are all educated, so read the books. Try to understand the philosophy, then your life will be successful. Thank you very much for your coming. It was time to go, but none of the devotees wanted to leave the room. They were happily basking in Prabhupada's presence. Madhavisa looked around the room, turned to Srila Prabhupada and grinned. I don't think any of the devotees here want to go, Srila Prabhupada. They want to stay with you. Prabhupada reciprocated with a mild smile. Then that is all right. The devotees stayed for 5 minutes more, then it was over. As devotees offered their obeisances, Prabhupada turned to Madhavisa. These are all residents in the temple? He asked with a slight gesture of his hand. We would like them to all to be residents, Srila Prabhupada, replied Madhavisa, but some of them find it a little difficult. Prabhupada's reply, so make it suitable, spoke volumes. It was quite clear from the content those coming to the temple would feel welcome and at ease, not threatened or alienated. Prabhupada had written, our different centres are meant for organising a group of pure devotees so that neophyte visitors may take examples from them and thus become attracted to Krishna consciousness. If the devotees become sufficiently advanced in Krishna consciousness, then the natural decorations of a saintly person, mercy, humility, equality, mildness, peacefulness, respectfulness, and freedom from false prestige would attract people to not only come to the temple, but to actually take up the process themselves. Prabhupada's use of the word suitable was a clear indication to those devotees fortunate enough to be already living Prabhupada's use of the word suitable was a clear instruction to those devotees fortunate enough to already have the opportunity of full-time shelter in Krishna's temple, to avoid animosity and confrontation. In short, Prabhupada was making it clear that example was far better than precept. The devotees reluctantly rose to leave the room. Prabhupada spoke out kindly, so take prasadam. The devotees filed past as Prabhupada calmly and happily gave, without discrimination, his deft hands and elegant fingers picked up the flat pera sweets and expertly placed them into each extended palm, making no distinction between stalwart men, shy women, or expectant children. Prabhupada desired that prasadam be distributed widely from all his ISKCON centres. Now Srila Prabhupada demonstrated the simple act by offering sweetmeats from his own hand. So, it's almost 7:30. In a few minutes we'll have the Arati ceremony for Srila Prabhupada. And this is 7:30 was the time that Srila Prabhupada actually passed away in Vrindavan. In Vrindavan in 4 hours' time they will also be having this ceremony, 4.5 hours' time, about midnight, I think, 8:30, about midnight, Melbourne time. And there aren't, actually we're very fortunate because there aren't many temples in the world where we have the opportunity of having Prabhupada's rooms intact. We're very, very fortunate to have this facility where Prabhupada came here over a 2-year period, 75 and 76. And practically everywhere we walk in this temple, Prabhupada walked. And some very good instructions here. And also Prabhupada's last darshan in 1976. Prabhupada wanted that the grounds be kept very nicely and we plant grow flowers. It's very creditful to Ganesh and Rudra Prabhu that we'd be able to do this very nicely, look after the grounds and keep the temple very clean. Of course there's always room for improvement, but we should, Prabhupada always stress keeping the temple clean, looking after the deities very nicely, dressing the deities gorgeously, keeping the temple clean. Also the devotees becoming exemplary in their character so that people who came would be attracted to Krishna consciousness just by seeing the exemplary behaviour of the devotees inside the temple. So all these were custom. I mean, Prabhupada gave many instructions in many places, but these were particular custom-made instructions that Prabhupada gave here for the Melbourne temple devotees. So these instructions we should cherish and keep these very close to our heart. And glories to Srila Prabhupada. Sri Radhurvida Sri Bhagavat Prasado Sadvana Pittan Hari Bhakta Sangam Radhurvida Sri Bhagavat Prasado Sadvana Pittan Hari Bhakta Sangam Vaivatri Jata Sadaiva Pande Guru Sri Charana Govindam Vaivatri Jata Sadaiva Pande Guru Sri Charana Govindam Sri Radhika Madhavayara Para Madhurya Leela Gunarpanana Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Prasaya Bhutale, Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami, Kirti Namine. Vishnu Padaya, Krishna
Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srila Gaura Bhaktavinda Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Hare